All right, so let's get this started. It's been a little bit of a delay. Um, some issues with Jitsi, which hopefully get to work out in the future. And if you were trying to join, so sorry, I didn't realize that that was um, going to be um, requiring a login now to use the May 1st server. But should get that fixed in the future. Um, all right, so welcome to the sort of a little state of Runrig for 2024. Um, kind of intending this to be basically a snapshot of where we're at right now. It's been 1 year, I guess, since we started this kind of project, I guess. And I was kind of prompted to do this. I was talking to several people, but uh, mostly there was a really good uh, workshop I was able to participate in and present Runrig to the Open Teams HCD working group. That's the Human Centered Design working group. And it's led by Dr. Ankita Raturi. And she had wonderful feedback, and even though I was grossly underprepared for it, and kind of prompted me to think a little bit more critically about what we've been doing, what I've been doing with this project, and how to proceed and how to present Runrig as a project and how to communicate that. So what I'm going to do is, well, first you'll see this roadmap which I put out uh, maybe a month ago, um, and trying to lay out a lot of that stuff in sort of a document form. And so this here is kind of an attempt to a very rough attempt to present that in a video format. Um, so kind of the first thing, I guess, if you're watching this, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Runrig before. Just give a kind of rundown of what it is. Um, it's um, it's an aspirational project. Is kind of how I've been framing it recently. Um, but the goal is to really provide technology to farmers that can be provide more autonomy uh, through open source technology, but kind of like I say on the landing page here, to go beyond that because myself having worked in open source software for a long time, I can see some of the deficiencies in that where it gets the openness is hyper focused on source code and kind of intangibles that don't really meet all farmers where they're at. And I want to say really put emphasis on all farmers because there are always those who have the means and inclination to work with open source software, but that's a slim majority in my experience. So you'll find this roadmap here to kind of come back to and just give a high level view of what I'm going to be talking about for the next however long. Um, I'm just basically going to run through this roadmap as my notes, my main notes. So at the top, you'll see kind of the same summary. Um, I go into a bit of kind of lessons learned and mistakes made at the top, which I'm going to pretty much gloss over here. But you could read that just to get a sense if you really want to know what I think about kind of my own place in all this. Um, but for right now, I'm going to jump really to the first big thing, which is the business plan. Um, and there's many aspects to that, but can kind of break it down. Um, it's basically Runrig is a attempt to build software to try to do that sustainably. Obviously, you need to be funded somehow, whether that's as a nonprofit or for profit. For Runrig, we're looking to do that as a cooperative. There's different meanings of what cooperative is, and probably be best to just put a pin in that to explain the different types of cooperatives we're talking about as we get into that section. Um, but it takes a lot of thought, right, to try to actually get the operations of a cooperative off the ground and running and helping to serve people the way we want. Um, and then after that, kind of run through the specific projects, software projects that um, I've been working on with a few other folks and hope to continue developing. I should say a lot of the inspiration too for putting this roadmap together was to kind of just get this stuff out there, kind of get it, you know, on the site so people can get up to speed. But really, just for the sake of being able to focus a lot more energy on building things, which is something that I've missed doing through doing some of the community building and things like that, which are really great and really necessary. Um, but yeah, hopefully, can put more emphasis on this stuff. So if that's what you're interested in, yeah, hopefully you can zero in on that. And then finally, just kind of run through the schedule for, um, for how we're going to organize as a community around those things. Right now, and this is one of the things that, in this lessons learned section I've gone on and on about, but right now it's basically when I say we, I shouldn't say we, I should say I, because I've had various folks come in and contribute to this idea and this concept and some of the actual software. Um, and I anticipate people will continue to do that. It's been great so far. But it is also kind of a one-man show at this point, and I don't want it to always be that. But for right now, as it is, just keep that in mind, I guess. um, so yeah, let's just jump into the business plan, I guess. Um, so, like I say, Runrig's intended to be a means of providing, um, free and open source software for farmers, but also for food workers and food consumers, which is, obviously everyone on this planet. Um, but obviously, there's kind of a different approach that we're looking to take with this to do it in a non-exploitative way, in a explicitly anti-capitalist way, and that's come around to this kind of ambitious plan to develop not just a single cooperative, but actually many, three different types. But first and foremost, the kind of core of what Runrig is and hopefully will become would be a worker cooperative. So that would be myself, and hopefully the other engineers and designers, technicians, all the people who would work to build this stuff and deploy it out in the field, both figuratively and literally. Um, so yeah, so that's state should sort of speak for itself. Um, Second would be then platform cooperatives. And so this starts to get more into like what we actually want to build. There's a lot of literature on platform cooperatives. The kind of concept of that has been, I guess, in vogue for the last 5 years or maybe more. Um, Trevor Schultz is a good resource to look to for kind of the explication of that. But basically, it's the idea of, any platform, digital platform. There's Facebook and Google and Amazon and all those. Of course, those are all platforms, but they're all proprietary platforms. So the basic notion of platform cooperative is that, you would have a platform that provides services to its users, but that the users um, would be the owners of that platform, in a democratic kind of structure to give them, full control over the system. That's, handling their data and potentially handling aspects of their business or their personal lives, whatever. There's all kinds of ways to do that. But these would be platform cooperatives for farmers, for groups of food workers. So, a good way of kind of framing it all up would be like, if you had, if you had Grubhub, but worker owned, if you had, a, Amazon delivery, but worker owned, right? That would be the main gist of it. And then, so these platform cooperatives would hopefully not be just one. It would be ideal if they were focused on a certain bioregion. So if you were, kind of I'm here in New York City, the New York City metropolitan area and outlying farmland is quite quite vast and also kind of unique in the way the economics of small farming um, and all works here. So that could be a region that could have a platform cooperative that was catered to it. Um, and there might be a separate one for, if you were in Oklahoma or in, Brazil, who knows? Um, but the kind of thing stitching that all together would be this third part, because ideally there'd be a good deal of local control at the platform cooperative level. Um, somewhat managed by potentially the worker cooperative to provide the kind of technical expertise that again farmers aren't always able to provide, but to do that affordably through open source tools, off the shelf uh, software solutions, and then stitching that all together would be this idea of a data cooperative, which could take different forms, and maybe I'll hold off on going too much detail into that. But it would be essentially sort of a central hub that wouldn't be something that your typical user, farmer, or food worker would interact with directly on a regular basis. But it would be sort of the engine for these platform cooperatives. So you would log on to, like, my region's, farm co-op, .org or .com or something. And you would log in through that, and you would have all these utilities, maybe for crop management or for managing sales through or CSA subscriptions. But the data that was actually getting piped through that site would come from a single hub, and that would help to keep costs lower, and provide other aspects of just benefits to solidarity economy workflow. Um, so those are the main groups. But the really key thing here is, at least in terms of my perspective in trying to get this started, is you can't really have any of that if you don't have the people to build it, which is of course then this worker co-op right at the top. So what what I see is the best way to move forward, and I talk about this more in the Runrig plan, which you can also refer to. It gets a little bit more into these details and all, how this might work, what it might look like. Um, but one of the things that I think is advantageous about this kind of um, model is that if the goal is to really create platforms for people to use open source software, not have to worry about doing all the hosting and all the technical stuff themselves. It creates these affordances to create interoperability between existing software, like say FarmOS, which is where I've done a lot of my work, but also Open Food Network, Survey Stack. There's all these. There's myriad of open source solutions for farming and food work. But it's hard to get them to kind of work together. And because they tend to be open source projects that they're not like flush with funding. Um, no one single one of them is going to have all the features that everyone needs. So there's a lot of these, kind of attempts to try to create interoperability. It's very challenging, right? But what we're looking to do is to do some things a little bit differently in terms of how data is structured. Like I kind of alluded to already. But it should allow us to create, these kind of middleware services or glue services, you might say, kind of in line with the way maybe 20 years ago there was a notion of like glue code where, you had a bunch of these Perl language hackers who would use Perl scripts as the glue that would hold together other, more elaborate, more robust libraries that were written in, C or C++ or something. Um, but you'd have these, these little Perl scripts that would just kind of glue it all together, so it would all hang as one. So you set up your little website back in circa 1997. Um, so this is the same idea of middleware, but middleware to make these services communicate with each other a little bit more easily. Um, I highlight here, and this is kind of to the point of, like I was saying about open source projects. They have all these. You can look on GitHub at like these features or enhancements that are labeled won't fixed and have been closed by their maintainers because you have somebody here. This is just recent. Please make option to hide the snap and chance, whatever, from the home launcher. I don't even know what this project is. But whoever the maintainer is saw this issue for whatever reason. They're like, well, we don't have the bandwidth for that, and that's not the fault of the maintainer. That's kind of the realities of working with uh, finite resources of any sort, right? Um, so yeah, so trying to zero in on those won't fix issues, right, as potential problem spaces that can be solved with this kind of middleware that we're proposing I'm proposing uh, to to create with Runrig. Um, so that would be phase one, and these are all kind of phases of a business model, just to highlight that point once again. So moving on to phase two, and so those would be kind of services that could be sorry, jumping back to phase one, those would be services that could be kind of done through contracts, through small kind of ad hoc work to, say you have a farmer and they want to, or a group of farmers who want to sponsor some kind of specific functionality to make these two um, pieces of software work together, or there are, I'm sure, loads of grant opportunities that could probably give a better example to where there's funding available to create better technology ecosystems to do that kind of work. But phase two would be where we move into actually building actual platform cooperatives, right? So beyond this idea of just middleware and glue services, kind of patching together existing services. This would be where we would start to say, okay, to build on that example of, say, connecting Farm OS with Open Food Network, at this phase two level is where we would start to um, actually provide farmers with their own instances of Farm OS that could be under managed hosting, um, and perhaps alongside that run some variation or form of e-commerce like Open Food Network, um, and provide different services that could be all potentially through like a single sign-on, where you go to, again, if you're stepping into the role of farmer or user or food worker, you might have one site that you log into under a domain, but this would be, but they would have a managed hosting scenario where the cooperative that's running that doesn't have to deal with the day-to-day maintenance and admin to host all that stuff themselves. So this would be the idea where the worker cooperative would provide these services to platform cooperatives. Um, and then phase three, you'll see already, I guess, how these are all kind of mapping onto these different legal entities. Phase three would be I call it here, one big data co-op with the little Wobbly's black cat there, as a reference to the IWW's idea of like one big union. The idea of this is again to seek collective strength through solidarity. Um, So the idea of having a broader, you know, across different bioregions, across different metropolitan regions, across different countries, potentially, hopefully, to have shared infrastructure, right? When we get to this level of, okay, we're hosting these services and all, and that's all good, but are we still using, Linode or some other system to do that? That's, at the end of the day, those are proprietary systems. They're owned by, perhaps less evil corporations, if it's a Linode or a DigitalOcean, but there's always going to be the challenge, it's always going to be hard to find alternatives to, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure services, for the actual metal that this stuff is running on, right? So this is, of course, the most ambitious aspect of this, pretty far out, but again, this is kind of the trajectory we're heading towards. And to boil all this down, right now, it'd be nice to be at phase one, but really not at the point right now of, I wouldn't feel comfortable quite yet, um, accepting contracts to do this specific work. Um, so I'm kind of framing this as being at phase zero for now, right? And what that constitutes is to build these reference implementations, um, for basically all the other three phases I've outlined here. Um, so you can kind of see how this is a bit of a kind of a fractal structure, where these kind of this rule of threes is maybe being played out. Um, but so building reference implementations, for the middleware, so like one or two examples of glue service that we could run. We've already got one that we've already got mostly built, which I'll get to in a minute. And just along with that, as part of phase zero, build a reference implementation of the kind of platform co-op we might be able to provide people with. Um, so actually stand up a couple services, on an independent server that that could be provided to a future platform co-op. And then phase three, just kind of looking at the hosting data services. Um, so now getting to those projects, or these reference implementations, right? So these reference implementations are essentially what I'm hoping to be working on for the rest of 2024. Like I said, we have one reference implementation that we've already started building. That's this early warning system, something we built for a farm co-op in Ohio. Um, it's a really, really basic thing. There's a screenshot down here. You'll see just how basic it is. Um, but it's just we're kind of just taking this idea of uh, triaging a working cooperative of small scale urban farms, um, who are all working under a single crop plan and tracking uh, their production status. Like, are they on track to meet those orders that they've accepted already, to hit these target yields that they have, etc. So it's real basic. It's probably not strictly even the most useful, to be honest, but it was a good proof of concept to start thinking about the ways that, this is a desktop application, um, but the idea is that it would be, networked to that larger kind of uh, data cooperative in the end, and potentially even connect to, the platform cooperative. So you could have this little sort of daemon running on your desktop, maybe just even in the system tray. This is an idea we were playing with too. Um, just have this kind of running in the background to alert you when, there's an issue with the production side, or perhaps more orders are coming in, or perhaps you exceed a kind of predefined cap on orders that you put in place. You already you don't want to sell more than you think you'll be able to produce, but if you hit that mark and then you happen to know you're actually on on pace to exceed your original harvest predictions, and then you could bump up that cap. Um, so yeah, those are the kind of phase one reference limitations. There's a little bit more fleshed out details on what that could all look like. Like I say, this idea of kind of monitoring expected yields is there's more to that kind of idea um, that we've been playing with. But so alongside this, we're going to hopefully work on building some integrations with third-party apps and services. So this would represent sort of the platform co-op aspect. Um, and there's, you know, thankfully there are existing um, platforms, cooperatively managed platforms even, um, that we can connect to in live time. So we could, we could very realistically take this early warning system and have it connect to some Farm OS systems on Farmier hosting, or have it connect to the Open Food Network for the USA network or Canada. Those are all up there and running right now, and they're open source systems. So the pathway to integration is a lot more straightforward because it's all you don't have to. Even if the documentation isn't great, you can always dig into the source code and figure out how to hit that API. And if not, then you can offer to open a pull request and make it possible um, for the upstream libraries. There's a couple here that are really cool. This crop, I think it's been about to be renamed. Uh, it's in French, but it's going to be renamed to this Bryn Hill crop planning for market gardeners. Really cool. This has actually been funded through the group uh, L'Atelier Paysan. It's in France, and this is a cooperative that's been around for a while, and I think they tend to work a lot more with hardware and things, but it's a really vibrant kind of forum for building alternative systems to your standard industrial ag. Um, but yeah, they would be really cool. Like to if we take this early warning system, like I say, we can not only it's possible to not only integrate it with these um, platform cooperatives, like I say, but it's also possible to integrate it with things like Crop, which I should have said this is a desktop software first. It looks like part of their roadmap is to make it available on the web as well. I'm not sure what the hosting environment for that would be, um, but potentially we could connect to both. So we could have this little early warning system running on the desktop right alongside a crop or Bingel instance. They could be sharing a database, or kind of enable exchange of data, whether it's in the form of an SQLite database, or even just like CSV files or spreadsheets. Um, and then at the same time, we can, while we're building all this, um, these reference implementations, we could also uh, work on the kind of hosting layer. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, and also a little bit reluctant to be too prescriptive in what this should or would look like. But there's some different protocols these days, such as first and foremost this idea of solid protocol, the solid project. This is where that idea of like common infrastructure of the data cooperative would allow for the hosting and storage of these data pods, right? That would be, they would belong to either an individual farmer or a food worker, or a collective of farmers and food workers. Um, so they would always, whoever that user is, however you want to define that, they would always retain, absolute control of the data in that pod, and then authorize it to be used in, different services, or on different platforms. And there's a uh, very well worked out kind of means of doing this. Actually, it's actually kind of a collection of many protocols for handling identity and authorization, all those things too. Um, but basically, just again, this is a reference implementation, so it would be kind of really just for experimentation purposes. But we could stand up our own solid pods. For instance, there's a community solid server that's open source. We could, put that up on a server somewhere, and test out, see how that would work if we tried to connect that with a Farm OS instance that we also had running. And try to connect the early warning system to both the pod storage and to the Farm OS system, and have that data move from the kind of local instance to the platform instance, and then to the data pod, or data provider, as I've called it elsewhere in the Runrig plan. Yeah, and just to not to like really just to kick the tires on like how this stuff works, right? Because there's gonna be issues with those connections, and making it all work in the wild, right? And that's really, again, back to the idea of like, this is all, phase zero, right? This is where we're gonna try this stuff out, right? Because this business plan, I think it makes a lot of sense, but I'm sure there's myriad issues with it that will only surface, if we actually try to build out these reference implementations, and ideally surface those things before we start looking for grants, looking for sponsors, um, to sponsor some of this development. Um, so yeah, so those are some of the projects. It's quite a lot. Don't really no expectation of getting to all of this. This is just kind of options that we can kind of pick and choose from to build these things. I have my kind of ideas of what I would want to focus on, but which is probably where things will go. But if other people come in, I'd really love to explore other things that aren't even necessarily on that list. Um, and so yeah, so those are the projects. That's the business plan. And as far as you know, bringing more people into this project beyond just myself, um, I'm hoping to do a little bit better at these kinds of live streams, um, and also uh, keeping to a more regular and hopefully more manageable schedule. So I kind of pleased myself with the kind of alliterative quality of this schedule here. So we have this, so the idea of the first Friday of every month, right? We'll do an early morning, um, or early morning, at least in Eastern Standard Time, kind of workshop where we just do like an hour or so of coding on, whether it's the early warning system we're working on or standing up a solid server, whatever it might be. Um, might just be me, hacking around on stuff. Uh, Hopefully structure that a bit to have um, sort of a presentation of what we've been working on too. So it may not be the most like hands-on, but give kind of a review of where things are at. Maybe work through some issue queues. Got some, like the issue queues here for the early warning system. I've got some milestones laid out. Those are past milestone actually. And this is one that should be kind of already done, but this is kind of the main part I want to focus on next with this. So if I was doing a or I guess probably the next time I get to do one of those workshops, I'll probably be going through this Alpha 3 milestone for the early warning system, which is going to be a lot to do with the data. This is all, you can find this on the GitHub repo if you're curious about what that looks like. But it should also be posted to YouTube for people who want to maybe catch up on what's been happening since the last time they checked in. Yeah, and so the other thing is this is all I've set up this. Where do I get to it? So these Runrig workshops should be all available to find here on this Nix um, services. It's an instance of Mobilisol, which is a Framesoft calendar open source uh, application. So you can add that to your calendar or get notifications if you want through that. And the other thing is, hopefully, again, this is getting into the aspirational part of it, but um, as more people get involved, I really, it's an important component of all cooperatives. It's one of the 7 cooperative principles, right? To provide education and training for their members, elected representatives, et cetera, and even for the general public, right? There's a kind of a built-in culture of shared and kind of group learning, which is I think awesome. And there's some ways I'd love to try to really build that into the DNA of whatever run rate eventually becomes. Um, yeah, and there's different I think different flavors and different levels of that we could approach. One thing I've talked to with David and other collaborators, this idea of working the run rate plan into something a little bit more of like a design methodology. So sort of like agile, but the idea is just to make it like anti-capitalistic, like not so fixed on shipping the product as building solidarity, building worker control of these systems, etc. What would that look like? I don't even know. So that's some of the idea of like where this could go as a community, I hope. Um, and the other thing is, maybe it's just a sort of tangent off of that, but the documentation and communication with all of that is, of course, like really critical. Um, and the other thing is, and I've mentioned this a few times, but I wanted to just make sure to get around to mentioning this at some point. It's this is going to be something hopefully that can sustain people, meaning make a paycheck, put food on the table. Um, but I do really, I'm pulling up this it's really great uh, publication from Cooperation Jackson from actually earlier last year. We're now in 2024. Um, so back May Day last year, they put out this statement. And it's really great. I recommend reading the whole thing. But I'm going to highlight this down here. Um, they lay out, or he lays out, this is Kali Akuno, I think, wrote this, what he calls the basic principles of class struggle cooperatives, right? He's kind of drawing on the idea of like class struggle unionism. It's kind of a earlier idea. Um, but it's a way of being very intentional about the goals of a cooperative, because you can have very very capitalistic minded cooperatives that are just looking to make profit, looking to compete in that market space. um, but this is a kind of 5 principles to kind of put forward as a way of serving as instruments of working class self-organization, right? engaging in active solidarity with other workers, worker formations. So working with unions, being very deliberate about this, being explicit um, that that this is we're not doing this to kind of be be another startup or get a bunch of VC funding. Um, we're doing this because uh, we want to see a different world. We want to see a world that can survive right into the into this 21st century, right? Um, to do this, we're diametrically opposed to the systems of capitalism that have led us to it. So, anyways, that's just me on my soapbox. But I do want that. There's a lot of this roadmap, right? That I'd love for people to tear down and just do something totally different in this space if it gets to a level where people have that sense of ownership for it. I guess at least for my own sake, though, I really want to participate in this or something else. Um, if it's got that at least that kernel of value to it. That again, that idea of class struggle cooperativism is I think it's a good approach to take for that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's most of the roadmap. In terms of you know getting hooked into all this stuff, if you're still interested, there's you can jump over to the getting involved section of the website. Try to keep a little bit of a schedule just laid out here. But you'll find all that here along with links to the Mobilizon events. And I still need to get this stuff up into the Go community calendar, but it should be up on there soon. The YouTube channel, all that stuff should be there. And also plug you into the various GitHub repos. Like I say, we got this early warning repo. There's not too much else going on in here. There's the plan itself, some other things like that. Hopefully more. Yeah, so I guess that.